Can you take us back to that morning, the tragic and horrific morning for all the Americans, most of the Americans, 9/11?
And you were
Matt just
looking
mentioned
at
we have a breaking
obviously
news
very
story to tell you
disturbing
about.
live shot there. That is the world
It's a
story.
major, very tragic alert for you.
I'm on the 5th floor walk up. I'm just gonna walk up. I'll walk up on the roof and check it out. I figure I'll go, I'll look at it, and I'll calm her down, And I just walk up on the roof, literally within 60 seconds from talking to her, I'm on the roof. And I just felt like when I opened that up, I walked into a movie. I walked like if you're sitting in a screen, you're watching the movie and you just walk in to the screen, just walk into the movie. And that's kind of what it felt like. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, It just shocking. During that time, while I was on that roof, I noticed that words were swirling around in me, and I was like, "Wow, I better write these 5 words down. Otherwise, I'm not gonna think anything else the whole day, just because they get stuck." So I'd write them on a piece of paper, and at the end of the day, all I had to show for my 9/11 was a paper with a bunch of words on it. And I looked at the words and I read the words, and I thought, okay, well, a title for this would be "Jazz for Peace." That would be the title of these words I wrote. What have you done to my heart? I hear jazz for peace.
Welcome to Inward Strides with Savni. I am joined today by jazz legend and peace activist Rick DellaRatta, the man who watched 9/11 unfold from just the blocks away and responded with something unexpected, a poem which became a global movement. Rick's journey took him from ground zero to global stages, using music as a tool for healing, activism, and unity. Today, in the podcast, we have talked about that morning that changed everything for Rick and what it truly means like to turn pain into power, and how Jazz for Peace has now touched over 850 causes worldwide. If you have ever wondered that whether one person or one note or one cause can make a difference, then this episode is to hear. And yes, there is a live piano playing in this episode. Let's begin.
So I want to start the podcast with the question, what are you grateful for today?
Today or in general?
In general, or
In general.
whatever.
In
Yeah.
general, I would have to say I'm grateful for the realization that um, we all have the opportunity to have a unique experience on this world that is a gift to us and is unique to us and special to us. And we all get to live things that maybe nobody else gets to live, while at the same time sharing many things in common. And probably that I'm grateful, what maybe the most grateful for is when I think back on everything, all the things that have happened, the good and bad and tragic and everything. I always seem to decide that I wouldn't trade anything for it. So, in other words, this situation led to this. So, if I got rid of this situation, even though it might have been not the greatest situation, I wouldn't have gotten this result because that changed my trajectory to this. You see what I mean?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
even like you mentioned, we're going to be talking about 9/11. It would be great if I didn't witness that. That would be wonderful. That would save me a lot of, visual trauma and all. But it would have also removed any opportunity for Jazz for Peace. So, in other words, I'm grateful for the fact that as I look back on my life, I wouldn't have traded anything for my journey.
Beautiful. Okay. So, Rick, I want to start with this feeling that Can you take us back to that morning, the tragic and horrific morning for all the Americans, most of the Americans, 9/11? What happened for you that day, both outside as well as inside?
Well, the day before, which was 9/10, was a relatively normal day for me. I was having my picture taken by a photographer who does what photographers do. They will spot someone that they think might be somebody someday or might be famous someday and catch them before they're well known or too well known, where they have access, and take pictures of them and then give them the negatives. So I had this woman was like, I want to take your picture. I'll give you the pictures. I'll have them for my, and I was like, great, what a great deal. We love that stuff because we get free pictures and all that. In fact,
Yeah.
if you look at the Jazz for Peace CD, you will see a picture taken on 9/10. So that's what I was doing on the 10th. You look at the Jazz for Peace, you'll see it in my neighborhood. It's like kind of a dumpster. It's a kind of a very earthy picture of me. It's on the Jazz for Peace CD. And she took that picture that day. So now fast forward maybe 16 hours later from that picture, and I get a phone call in the morning, which I often don't get, during those days, a musician's 9 to 5 for a musician was closer to 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. So I get this phone call in the morning. It's early. It's like 8:30. Not used to getting a call that early because most people just wouldn't bother to call me that hour. What would be the point? I'd be sleeping. So I answer the phone because it's ringing, and it's her. It's the woman who took the picture. The woman who took the pictures on the
Okay.
10th. Yeah. And she's very frazzled. And she said, I'm so sorry to call you, but I just didn't, I don't know who to call. I don't, we had spent the day together yesterday and I just didn't. And I'm like, listen, what is the, what's going on? What do you, no problem, but what's going on? What's the problem? Well, something's going, and she told a story about her boss. She gets the call. She has a day job to support her photography habit. You know what I mean? So she's like a photographer
Mm.
with a job on Wall Street, So she gets her son, her boss, like always, her son always calls her boss. The boss, her boss and the boss's son are very close. And on this morning, she gets a call. Hi, can I speak to my dad? And she tricks the call, and it's the son. And the son is in one of the World Trade Center buildings. He's in one of the buildings. And something happened to the other building that's, alarming. And he calls his father and says, hey, what the heck should I do here? Something happened over there. And the father's like, well, I don't, and they're talking back and forth. And the father says, you know, just to be safe, why don't you just get the heck out of there? Get out of that building just to be safe. What? Play it conservative. It's probably nothing, by the way. Most people would think, it's probably
Yeah.
nothing. Whatever happened in the other building, it's probably nothing, but to be safe. Okay, Dad, I'll
Mm.
get in the elevator, So she calls me and tells me this story. And I'm like, well, she's alarmed because usually, like, something happened in the World Trade Center. Usually that means somebody flew a kite in there, broke a window, something stupid happened,
Yeah.
dumb. So, and I'm still thinking that it's got to be, it's got to be. So I'm like, listen, where I live. I'm on the 5th floor walk up. I'm just going to walk up. I'll walk up on the roof and check it out. I figure I'll look at it and I'll calm her down, and I go up on the roof because I'm on the 5th floor walk up. The roof is right above me. And I just walk up on the roof, literally within 60 seconds from talking to her, I'm on the roof. And I just felt like when I opened that up, I walked into a movie. I walk like if you're sitting in a screen, you're watching the movie and you just walk in to the screen, just walk into the movie. And that's kind of what it felt like because I couldn't believe what I was seeing, it just shocking. And then it just got more shocking as the day went on because then, this guy's supposed to be getting out of that building, but his father never saw his son again because that other building, all of a sudden there was a big explosion in the other. It was like, what the heck is this? like why the other building? Like, why this building? Why the other building? So, their natural inclination is to think something strange happened in one building, but not that something's going to happen to the other building. So anyway, now it's just one thing after another. I remember a point during the day where there were silver people walking up the street because you didn't realize I didn't realize how close I lived because New York City, there's so many things before you get to the World Trade Center. You've got all this, you've got all these neighborhoods, this and that, and you've got Soho, you have all these things that you're going to see before you would get it. But it's less than a quarter of a mile away. It's just that there's so much activity. You don't realize how close it is. I had no idea that it was less than a quarter of a mile away until they roped it off with these, like, tanks, like army tanks, coming in and roping the whole thing off. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're within the quarter of a mile. We have to rope this off. So I had to get permission just to get groceries to walk out of there and walk back in, show an ID. Anyway, that was in the days following. But on this day, I did see like these silver people. And I'm like, is it Halloween? Because you disconnect. I'm like, these silver people are covered in soot from the World Trade Center. That's why they're silver, But and they had these they had those looks on their faces, too, like they were in character, but they were covered with soot and traumatized, and they didn't know what to do, so they were just walking north. They're just walking like they didn't know where they were going. I think they were just in total shock, Anyway, one thing after another. But during that time, while I was on that roof, I noticed that words were swirling around in me, and I was like, wow, I better write these 5 words down. Otherwise, I'm not going to think anything else the whole day, just, because they get stuck. So I'd write them on a piece of paper, and then some other words would come. I was like, oh my God, here go more words. I just wrote those down, and then I was able to think again, and I was able to, and so when I purged the words on the paper, I was able to go back to normal. Otherwise, the words would just go, on like a hamster wheel, like a word salad hamster wheel, like a Kamala Harris speech or something. So that's a joke. I don't want to make fun of anybody, but anyway, that's funny, right? But anyway, that's what it was like. So I would purge it onto the paper, and at the end of the day, all I had to show for my 9/11 was a paper with a bunch of words on it. I'm like, what the heck? What am I going to do with this? And I looked at the words and I read the words and I thought, okay, well, a title for this would be Jazz for Peace. That would be the title of these words I wrote. So that's what I had. I had it from watching it. And like I said, it's not like I, struggled or when, the words were just, I had to get the words out. The struggle would have been if I didn't write the words out, because then they'd be swirling around. Like I said, I'd be a word salad.
So did putting those words into music, what it unlock in you?
To put the words to music? Well, the first thing I did really was actually nothing, because I didn't know what to do with the words. I'm like, I didn't even know I was a poet, because usually I'm a lyricist, and usually I have a melody first. So a melody would be first, and then there would be, what I did was there was kind of a melody I had written, and I kind of fit the words to that. But that would be for a choir, and that's never really been performed. So I actually have a choir piece of the Jazz for Peace poem, but I need a choir to sing it. Someday maybe a choir will figure that out. But right now, that I was like, okay. So I kind of had something, but what happened was finally the country opened up, and I was like, are you sure they're going to? Yes, they're opening up on this day. And I was like, well, the next day I have to be somewhere. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do this. I had to be in Savannah, Georgia, to headline at a jazz festival. It was a really big thing. And I was like, I don't even know if what's going to happen with this. But anyway, they opened. I got on a plane with my band immediately. Like, first thing we did when the country opened was go to the airport to get on this plane and get down there. And so I recited the poem at that jazz festival, and I was the headliner on it. So over 8,500 people heard the words to this poem. I
Wow.
actually felt sorry for people like Edgar Allan Poe and all these great poets who died penniless and no one ever heard their poems, during their lifetime. Here, I only write
Mm.
one. I write one poem, and 8,500 people get to hear it. So it was very strange. Like I said, I could have been more known as a poet than a musician at that moment. Who knows? Because people were very affected by the poem. I got to admit, even the band members were like taken by, because I didn't tell them either that I had this poem. I just read it in the middle of the show. So, but the poem started working its way north. Everyone knew that I had recited a poem and that it stirred people, and word got north. And then I got a call when I got back saying from another event I had, it was also a pretty high profile event in upstate New York. And they said, "Well, we heard about this poem. What's going on? What do you wrote a poem? What's going on here?" And they said, "Do you think you might put it to music for our concert?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, since you have such a, if you want, I mean, it sounds like a good idea to me, right? I mean, I might as well just let the best ideas, let the cream rise to the top here. That sounds like a good idea." So by then I did recite it over I put some music, I put like harmonies down for the band to play, and I kind of recited the poem that way. And then the press came out calling it the first Jazz for Peace concert. So they said DellaRatta starts out concert with Jazz for Peace. In fact, next year is the 25th anniversary of that concert, the first Jazz for Peace concert in Troy, New York, at a place called Troy Savings Bank Hall or something like that. It was a beautiful concert hall. And there are people that are talking about celebrating, the 25th year of the Jazz for Peace concert in other cities. So maybe we have to talk to this Troy, New York, and see if they even know that this concert, is that their city is known all over the world as the location
Mm.
of the first ever Jazz for Peace concert. That, of course, I didn't know was going to be the first ever Jazz for Peace concert until the articles came out after I
Yeah.
opened the concert with this Jazz for Peace song. And that's launched again. So one thing launched another thing launched another thing. So, 9/11 launched the poem. You know what I mean? The poem, the concert then launched the piece, Jazz for Peace. And then the press, picking up on that, launched that this was the first ever Jazz for Peace concert in the history of the world.
So
And
how did the Jazz for Peace go from that single concert and then the concert up in the north and to this 850 of them? Like it is a revolutionary movement, and yeah.
Well, what happened was it's very similar to, let's say, what somebody like Beethoven would do. He starts out with
Mm.
a little motif, da 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 da, or something like that, or even some of his other. I was on a podcast the other day, and a person was talking to me about it, about how a composer. So it starts out with a little tiny little, motif, a little molecule, and just like a tree starts out with a seedling. So that poem you could call a seedling, and then next thing you know, it's starting to grow roots. It's recited, and then it's a concert, and then it's this and it's that. So I started doing jazz. I was like, what am I going to do now? Because this has been launched in the press now, and people know about it. And I'm back in New York, and people somehow know that I'm associated with a poem that has been read for over 8,500 people. That's now had a first Jazz for Peace concert. And what am I going to do? What are you going to do? So I started doing little Jazz for Peace concerts around New York City. But while I was doing this, I did ask my manager to call over to the United Nations and just tell them who I am and tell them all my credentials. I mean, I had done a lot of I had done a lot during that time with my career and all that, and that I would I perform in multicultural groups. I would like to bring a multicultural group and do a performance at the United Nations. And almost a year after that, she tells me, while she's telling me about some other things, like she's briefing me on some things, like, okay, you have this thing in Paris, and you remember the bass player, lives in Paris now. You're going to play with him, and the drummer used to drive a cab. Now he's a hero, a big star in Paris. You're going to play with these two guys from New York that live in Paris. Then you're going to get on a train and go to Italy with the drummer, and you're going to pick up an Italian bass player in Milan. Then you're going to go from there
Wow.
to, this was pretty much what she was saying. You're going to go from there to Luxembourg. Oh, and by the way, that United Nations thing, they want to do that. I said, well, thanks for lumping that all together, because I don't think she realized, she doesn't really know one from the other. You know what I mean? To me, in my mind, I was like, this is a big thing, but she just looked at it, they were just all equal, all concerts are created equal, in her mind.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have performed across borders. Now, when I'm listening across languages and cultures, what have you learned about humanity through your concerts, through your music?
One thing I've learned is that there is simply a lot of disconnect out there with people believing things that they've been, indoctrinated. I hate to use that word, but they've almost been indoctrinated. They have certain beliefs that they're indoctrinated. So because they come from this way, this source or whatever, therefore it's true. Therefore, you know what I mean? The problem is, it's a million zillion miles from the truth. I mean, I hate to say it, but I was telling somebody the other day, because I've been to Africa 9 times. I said, you hear that billionaire who says he wants to save people in Africa, right? He says, yeah, I know what you're talking. I said, well, what do you think of that? What do you think? I was like, well, and he tells me this story about what we would think, because we know nothing about Africa. These people in America, me, I would be one of them, but I've been there 9 times. I said, do you have any idea how many people live in Africa? Do you have any idea how big Africa is? I said, the last place I played in Africa was a country that has almost as many people in the country as the entire United States. And that country, you can look it up, it's Nigeria. Nigeria, just the country of Nigeria, has almost as many people as the whole United. He says, you mean it has almost 300 million? It has almost 300 million people in Nigeria. That's just one country. Now there's 51 additional countries. Besides that, 51 more countries with people in them. You know what I mean? And you're telling me that we've all got to go save lives in Africa? They're swamping us with lives. Do you know what I mean? But this is what they tell us that, and we just believe it because we don't know anything. We don't know anything about Africa. Nothing about Africa. So imagine how little they know about the Middle East if that's all they know about Africa. So my point is, there's all these things that just, because we're told therefore, but it's really not that way. In fact, from traveling all over the world, I can tell you that the meanest, most evil country that you can think of, I can find a person as nice as you in that country. You know what I mean? And as evil as so-and-so or such and such that's down the street here. In other words, we're all made up of these different people. We're all made up of these different themes and variations of people. They're not aliens. We all are similar as humans. We all have innate things about us. We all have goodness inside of us. There's greatness in every single one of these countries if you find the right person. There's no place I haven't been that I haven't learned something extraordinary. Whether it's your background of India, I mean, it was extraordinary to go there. But even that region of the world, I've been to Pakistan, I've been to Nepal. It's it's the way you spin it almost. And what we really have to do is, it all boils down to something I said by accident. And again, this was the preview leading up to the first Jazz for Peace concert in Troy, New York. This Troy, New York, we'll see what they do now to celebrate this next year. I don't know. Let's see, because it's the 25th year. But there's an article came out in the Troy Record, so their local newspaper. This is an article that came out a few days before that concert. And in that article, I recited the Jazz for Peace poem because the person called me up and wanted to hear the poem. So I recited for him, and it came out in the article. But then a sentence came out that was even more important than that. And it was just me saying off the top of my head now, just off the, I wouldn't have even remembered if he didn't print it. If the guy in the Troy newspaper did not print this, I would not have remembered saying it. Because even I saw it on websites. I was like, did I say that? When did I say that? I had to look it up. So,
Okay.
because I didn't even know what article it came from. So
Mm,
I said, if we all just fill up our souls with our greatest qualities, artistry, creativity, humanity, intellectuality, we will have a better chance. And that's true, a better chance of avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. This is, I mean, I'm telling you, I just flew out of
yeah,
me. I just said it off the
yeah.
top of my head, but it keeps getting more true every day, not less true.
Mm,
And what happened was from this article from Troy, New York, and who knows if the people of Troy even know about this, the
mm,
article gets lifted. I mean, the sentence gets lifted,
mm.
unbeknownst to me. And now I'm in a situation years later now, 3 years later, 4 years later, where someone's calling, hey, we're calling from Portland. We know you guys for Jazz Reviews with Portland. Do you have any information? Could you send it? And I'm like, well, let me see if I can find it on Google. It's probably on. I go on there. I can't find what they want, but I find people. Who say, I find a guy who says my 50 greatest quotes of all time. Somebody else. And I'm listed with Einstein and I'm this one and Tesla. And, I'm listed with all of these Gandhi. Rick DellaRatta, and I didn't even know I said it. Like, and I'm when did I say that? And where did they get it from? And they got it from an article from Troy, New York, from like I said, a preview of the very first Jazz for Peace concert, which, unbeknownst to any of us, ended up, as you know, being called the most significant cultural event of our time.
So what you have seen, like as you were explaining, I got this question that when like different people from different cultures, they are all connected through this one sound. How does it feel for you and what you have seen shifted in the audience as well?
Well, that's interesting. I think there's a shift when it comes to me. So maybe not
Mm,
when it comes to jazz in general, but hopefully it'll spread to the art form as a whole. But now
mm,
there are many people looking at me as someone who transcends what their idea of music was. And
mm,
again, now we get into these indoctrinated, gaslit misnomers that we default on because we just were told them so much that we just believe them. I myself am thoroughly gaslighted, I'm sure, with all kinds of things that are probably not true, but they came in and I believe them. But the whole idea that music is only to sell a product or to entertain us, I mean, there are many people who just that's what they think. That's all music
yeah.
is. They have this thought, but I mean, look at history, look at indigenous people, go anywhere, study ancient China, study Africa, go wherever you go, you'll see music use as a healing tool, use it as a spiritual, connection. There's all kinds of way that people have been using music. And by us taking those qualities out of the soup just so we can sell more products, okay, that's us harming ourselves. Now, maybe you can say, well, it's them harming us by making us think this, so maybe we'll drink more beer. I don't know what their reason was, but the bottom line is, we bought into it too, and we all have to take a little bit of responsibility and say, hey, let's just put these things back in the soup, of what it really is. And that's what music is. It has way more potential than, like I said, just to entertain you or sell you a product. It's you're not even scratching the surface of its potential when you do that.
Mm. Yeah, beautifully said. And I totally agree with that because I learn Indian classical music and I can totally relate to it. It is so much beyond selling the music. It's like you are doing something from the heart for yourself, and when you're doing from the heart, it just reaches the masses uh, through the
Correct.
surrender. Yeah.
Yeah, and anyone who has studied Indian music in the West, if you talk to them, they're just, they're really blown away with the rhythms and the tabla rhythms and the way that they play these like sevens and fives and they mix it. And we love to do that with jazz now. We love, and it comes from India, those rhythms. Those rhythms come from India. And I will sometimes visualize like groupings of seven or 11 or five. And it's the tabla players who were, inspiring that.
So with rhythm, have you also explored the ragas in Indian classical music? Because there's a lot of similarity, as far as I know, between the jazz and Indian classical music.
There is. I mean, I haven't, I would like to explore it more, but I basically just, really for me, it started with a band called Shakti, which was John
Mm.
McLaughlin, the guitar player. So he really opened the door for us because we didn't really know hardly anything. Most of us average Joe Americans, even though we were musicians, but it was like, wow, what is McLaughlin doing here with these Indian guys? And it's so fascinating. So
Mm.
I've opened the door up more with that and listened to stuff. But like I said, my knowledge probably compared to yours is, probably I could learn a thing or two from you. Is my point. In fact, maybe you should even let me know if you come across something you'd like me to listen to. I'd be glad to just send it over to me. I'll check it out.
No, I think that's you're really humble, but I'm learning. I'm a student, and yeah, I enjoy music. I think I'm learning a lot from you. So
Okay. Well, my point
yeah.
is like, I will ask anybody anything. I feel like I can learn anything from anyone. Like I ask my volunteers to make
Mm.
recommendations of songs to play on these podcasts. And so you've listened to a lot of music from India. If something ever comes to your mind, like, hey, I really want Rick to hear this. If he hasn't already heard it, just send it over. I'll check it out.
Okay, sure. That
Okay.
sounds great. So, what does it feel like when you are playing for healing instead of an applause? Like, what do you feel inside?
It's a new way of embracing wealth
Mm.
because we have this, and again, we're kind of stuck in a box where it's like there's a lot of people who value a person based on how many things he owns, and the whole form of ownership is questionable if you go back into indigenous peoples. I mean, a lot of people had no, they had no acknowledgement or interest in ownership. It was the land belonged to everybody, the mountains belonged to everybody, the animal, the life, the river, the water. So that something looks kind of unpure about the whole ownership thing in the first place. It looks something tainted about the whole idea. But then how, depending on how much you own, they're looking at you as, well, he must be great. Look at, he has 7 houses or whatever it is. So this is this mindset. But in all honesty, if you look at some of these people, how rich are they on the inside? Well, if they're rich on the inside, it's not from the houses. It's from something else.
Mm.
If they are,
Mm.
you know what I mean? And my point is, when you do it, the answering your question, that's where I feel another form of wealth, maybe a truer form, a more a more authentic type of wealth that you gain from this way of using music to help people, to make a difference, to, especially when the people insist that they've been helped. Because I'm easy to not believe it. All I have to do is tell me, but they won't do that. They're like, they send us these testimonials and they're all on a page. It's a page called jazzforpeace.wordpress.com/about. You've seen it. And that's really what I say. There's nothing on that page by me. I don't say a word on that page because that's the page. I mean, how are you going to argue with someone who says that you made a difference? And so that is a wealth that I cannot refute. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Has there been any moment on stage or off stage where jazz became your own therapy?
Yeah, well, I think the journey is kind of a form of therapy, the journey, because
Mm.
again, it's back to authenticity. And I'm meeting people in a real sense on their terms. I mean, I know people that have traveled to different countries, and there's no way they could have experienced what I experienced because, like I said, I'm so in touch with the people that I travel to meet. I mean, if you just any event, I mean, if you just look at the event in India, the south of India, I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, I traveled there to help the Dalits, and they actually advertised it. They advertised it that I was there for the climate awareness, they said.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
they said that because they said if we tell them what you're really here for, they might get, they might get in trouble because you're not supposed to help them.
Why?
Well, because they're the lowest caste system.
Oh,
And if you take them out, if they let's say if they are enlightened and out of their caste, who's going to do those jobs? The way it's set up is, I believe, you're born into being a sewer worker or whatever. So these people are born into these jobs, and they don't really, you know, um, they want to make sure that caste system stays in place. And so I don't know. I'm just telling you what they did. I mean, it's
wow.
yeah.
That's rough.
If you look at the video, you can look at videos of me. In fact, I believe there's a video if you go on YouTube and you just put how they did it, or Jazz for Peace, how they did it, or Jazz for Peace intro, or something like that. And it's a video. It starts out with India, and you'll see a giant sign 15 feet high that they made. Giant sign 15 feet high saying Jazz for Peace, all in Indian Sanskrit. And it does say in English, for climate awareness. And like I said, I was, literally working with the deletes. I was really ingrained with these people for many, many days. And like I said, I knew them. They treated me like family, and I almost felt like they were my family too.
That was rough, what you shared. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of rough things like that. Unfortunately, I have a lot of news. Like yeah, I can tell you a lot of stuff like that.
So, what do you think happens to the human heart when we really listen to the live music?
Well, one thing we noticed was that the art form of jazz has the ability to have a profoundly positive effect on a person. So that's the difference right there from a Jazz for Peace fundraiser, let's say, and just any old fundraiser. And you'll have a
Yeah.
lot of people who are like, well, the more money we made, that means the better the fundraiser it was. But again, there's a big difference between a wild salmon and a farm raised salmon. And I mean, the difference is massive, right? You've got a salmon that's swimming upstream in pristine, clean waters and, going through this outrageous journey to become what it is, which is an incredibly, filled with nutrients. And then you have this other thing that looks exactly like that, except it doesn't swim anywhere. It's born into slavery. It's in a polluted waters in Vietnam where it never even swam, where its whole species has never swam before, in a farm, like in a little cubicle. And then one thing after another, I can make even feel worse with that story than the other one. But you know, it's a big difference is my point. So my point is, at a Jazz for Peace event, you are going to get an authentic situation where you will have a chance to be profoundly positively influenced just by the music. And we looked that up historically. Now that's what I'm saying. It's not like if you went to a farm raised jazz event, that's different too. That's, you're not going to get that. But I'm just saying you're getting a real jazz. I make sure I'm there so that you're definitely going to hear, a jazz artist who has the ability to do that. So we looked it up historically, and we found precedent, throughout the years of people who had been profoundly positively influenced. And one of the persons that we put on our website is a guy named Charles Black. This guy, Charles Black, who was a white guy, but his name Charles Black. He lived in the Midwest, and again, he was a racist by default. Not because he wanted to be, but just he had just thought everything that he was supposed to think in that Midwestern town. And he goes to some party to supposedly meet a girl, supposedly, it's like a singles party or whatever it is. And there's a band there, and he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He ends up watching the trumpet player. And he's staring at the trumpet player, and he's a young guy. And he's in a position where, like, these young kids want to come to a determination on their own, again, an authentic determination. And he now figures out that that man's a genius on the trumpet. That guy's a genius. I have come to the conclusion myself in my heart, he's a genius. Problem is, the person he was watching just happened to be Louis Armstrong, who happened to be playing the trumpet in that band. And he now thinks Louis Armstrong is a genius, except for one problem: Louis Armstrong's black. And how can you be a genius and not even be allowed to vote? How can you be a genius and not even, have to drink in a drinking fountain? All this kinds of stuff, right? You have to go to this bathroom, all this stuff. So he was profoundly positively influenced and became a very high achieving person. And at the end of his life, because he ended up authoring some of the biggest documents in our nation's, archives. One of them is Brown versus the Board of Education, is a landmark educational document in the United States, because he became a senator, a congressman, this, that, and the other. He, like I said, he authored Brown versus the Board of Education and numerous other things. And they asked him at the end of his life, you came from this small town. There's 120 in your graduating class or whatever. How did you, And he just said jazz, and he brought up that moment, and he brought up how he was profoundly, positively influenced. So again, and now we also have historical precedent when it comes to music. And one thing we point out to is something called the story of the weeping camel. I've mentioned it so many times that a podcast actually asked me about it recently, because they said, we knew you'd been talking about this. And it's a story of a family in Tibet, all the way in Tibet now, right? And some guy goes up there to do a little documentary on what life is like for indigenous people in Tibet. And while he's doing the documentary, just some crazy situation happens within the family, because they got this camel, and the camel's giving birth, and he gives birth to an albino camel. And now they need this camel to survive so they can survive. They need this stuff. But the mother doesn't want anything to do with the albino because it's white. So the mother will not feed the white camel. And now that's a problem for them. You see what I mean? Because they need the camel to live, because they use these camels for travel, for this, for that, whatever they need them for. So they now, instead of him filming them, all they're doing is trying to figure out how they can keep the camel alive and get the mother to, come to her senses and not discriminate against her own child. And this is what now the whole face of he has to change the whole trajectory of his movie now to be a story about this camel. Now he can't really film the people, because the people are all focused on the camel. So they can't cooperate with his movie anymore. It's all about the camel. They try this and they try that and they try this. It's almost like one of those Bugs Bunny things where the guy's trying to get Bugs Bunny 9 million ways to Sunday and he can't catch him. They're trying a million ways now to get, and they can't do it. So now they have this meeting and they say, well, that's it. We've got to get the musician. We've got to get the musician. At the end, after all out of bullets, now the only person that can save this, they've determined the only person now that can save this is a musician way the hell out somewhere. And they got to go find him. So they get on donkeys and they ride donkeys for 3 days to get to this musician. Yeah, they got to get him. They have to get him. That decision has been made. The gavel has come down. Get the musician. They go and find this musician in some other part of Tibet, and they tell him the story. And next thing you know, he's packing up all of his musical instruments and all this stuff on another camel, comes all the way back up, and he literally does this amazing healing process where he takes I don't know if you've ever seen certain instruments like a cello or a bass where they resonate,
Yeah.
you know, how they have the resonate, the wood. He's got these instruments with the resonating things. And he's putting them on the body of the mother, all over the mother's body, all around. And now that he gets everything set up with all of this big setup now, and now he's people pull the mother over. She wants nothing to do with this. The mother is so upset. Pull the mother over, pull the child over. Now she's even more upset. And now they pull the child, they pull the mother together. And now he plays a violin for 12 hours straight with all of the everything resonating. And you can see this movie, you can see it online. You should watch it actually. And everything. And he sits there and he plays till the camel weeps. The woman starts crying, or this mother, literally on the camera now, tears start flowing out of her eyes, drenching puddles of tears, and she accepts the baby camel, and just love, outpouring of love, and just everything. I mean, everything, the whole thing is healed by the musician. And here we are in a society that tries to solve problems with absolutely no arts and culture whatsoever. Nothing. Okay. Go on these shows now. Next year will be the 25th year of the concert that I'm in hundreds of interviews, people like you all over the world finding out about it. I mean, where was this woman that interviewed me yesterday? I mean, way out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in some country. Anyway, this country, Troy, this city, Troy, I don't know. I haven't heard from them. I mean, maybe the mayor is someday going to watch your video, I hope. But my point is, you know, um, here are these people. Have you ever heard them say jazz for? There's three words that they can't say. They never said. I mean, these big companies, right? I don't know, CNN, just anyone, Fox, anyone. Have you ever heard them say jazz for peace? They've never said those three. They've said every other word in the dictionary now, except these are the last three words left in the whole dictionary that for them to say, and they're still like dodging it. How are they doing it? How are they so adeptfully dodging those words? I don't know. But it is absolute insanity based on my experiences all over the world meeting with people. There's nothing more insane you can do than try to solve a problem removing the arts and culture, literally the star player. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like if a restaurant says we're going to serve chicken soup now and they pull the chicken out. It's mind boggling. And they keep trying. They keep trying. And as you can see, they keep getting further and further away. I mean, these problems are, as they get further away, they keep trying more. It's like, it's dystopian. It's dystopian. And then with the arts and culture and with nothing, you go to that page and you see what Jazz for Peace has done. Do you know what I mean? With nothing. Now, the other crazy thing is, and this is crazy, go to pick a billionaire out of a hat. Just pick any billionaire. Put a bunch of little pieces of paper, 80 billionaires if there are that many. Throw them in a hat. Just pick them randomly. Just pick randomly. Okay, this one, his name. Go to their website and see if you can find that page. Find that page on their website. I have people who tell me like almost these things that they hear on the news all the time. They just say those words. They just like speak them. I say, I hear what you're saying because I've heard that channel say it like for 10 years, and you're saying the exact same thing. And you believe that. Oh, yes, I believe. Great. Here's a page. Show me where that page is on that website. And
Yeah.
you see them try to get out of it. They'll say, well, here's the website. Here's the website. I said, but I want you know where that page is. I don't know where the page is. I wish you know. They don't know where the page is and they can't find it.
But I think the goodness through music is spreading all the way, no matter what, how people behave because of certain situations. But I think music has Music is so powerful that it is and it is reaching to the people, and you are one of the superstar to do this, to help people out, and truly grateful for what everything you have done and whatever you will be doing in the future. So it's incredible. So as we are talking about music, can you share with us the piece that most captures your heart's mission, like something that carries the soul of jazz for peace?
Well, okay. Now I could do that in two ways. One way would be to honor the poem, the words of the poem that I wrote on that day that started everything. And the other way would be to honor our volunteers, because Jazz for Pieces has hundreds of volunteers from all over the world. And what we've done that's been very successful, because people have interviewed me about that too, H&R departments, is we try a different technique. Rather than tell them what we need and see if they can do it, we try to research them and see what they're passionate about. Because I'm passionate about what I do, and I would be nowhere if I wasn't. And if you stuck me in something I wasn't passionate about, I'd get an F minus probably as a grade. You know what I mean? So why not? Why get an F minus at something that you're not passionate about when you get an A plus at something that you are passionate about? And so we have sometimes connected with volunteers that way, and they just have fun. They enjoy what they're doing, and Jazz for Peace will grow in that direction. We might not grow in the direction of that need, because we just don't have anybody who's passionate about it to fill it, but at least we'll grow somewhere. At least we'll grow in a direction, and it'll be fun for our volunteers. So our volunteers, what I could do is I could play a song requested by our volunteers. I don't know which one, and then go into the Jazz for Peace poem, and then you can hear both sides of what I want to pay tribute to. But I mean, I don't know what song. I'm looking at like little songs they recommended. Like this is one by the Police. It's called "Walking on the Moon." This is a one about April. It's called "April in Paris." This is one about the Beatles. This is one by a band called Queen. Do you have any favorite? What kind of music do you like?
I'm okay with anything, but then as this is April, maybe April in Paris.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
April in Paris, chestnuts in blossom, holiday tables under the trees. April in Paris, this is a feeling no one could ever reprise. I never knew the charm of spring, never met it face to face. I never knew my heart could sing. I never missed a warm embrace till April in Paris. Who can I run to? What have you done to my heart? pajama spring, never met it face to face. I never knew my heart could sing. I never missed a warm embrace till April in Paris. Who can I run to? What have you done to my heart? What have you done to my heart? I hear jazz for peace coming through the trees. In my heart it fills me like a celebration. I see the light and I want to follow. Inspired by the past contributions, of those that came before. When we speak it, people are enlightened. By the creativity and artistry that stands for peace and love and humanity. That we have in our souls. So we can raise our total conscience and see that the gift of giving is our greatest privilege. I hear jazz for peace.
What have you given to my heart? Oh my God, this was beautiful. I felt like the story, the emotions were unfolding with every single piece you were playing. It was so beautiful. Thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you so much. I mean, I don't even know what I did. So that's the good part is, I mean, if I don't know what I did, then that's a good sign because that means that the music hopefully just came through me and I was a conduit for possibly a higher power. We don't know.
Yeah, beautiful. It was so beautiful. Yeah, thank you. So, we are at the end of this section, and I feel very bad about that because I was so much engrossed in the music. Like at the end, I would like to like. So, what do you want the next generation of musicians, or let's say just people, to know about the music, the art, and what they can do with it?
I think that my example could hopefully open up something that has been closed by a capitalistic, profiteering Western civilization that probably means well. But the problem is, not everything benefits when you try to squeeze a maximum profit out of it. And the profits in music are not specifically related to currency, fiat currency generation, generation of it, or abundance, but there is, like I said, other forms of wealth. There's spiritual wealth. In fact, just what Jazz Peace has been able to do, with our concert at the United Nations and the vote that recently took place, where 96% of Israelis, Palestinians, Americans, and people around the world voted for a proposal that Jazz Peace has put forward. They all voted for it, and it hasn't even been looked at. But I mean, that right there, when you think about the money that could be saved with music, I mean, that would be $3 trillion from the day that we made our statement at the United Nations to the day that it was calculated, the amount spent. A couple of months ago, an article came out where they calculated the amount that was spent on something that 96% of our world wants ended, and chose our proposal to be the one to follow to solve the issue. So my point is, the abundance that music is bringing to the table is vast, and you have to not only look at the money that you can make from it, from purely let's say entertainment purposes, but look at the money you can save from it, from the amounts of problems that might be completely unnecessary had we kept that whole, had we looked at all that music and the arts and culture has to offer. And not just that, but I think the fact that we can help outstanding causes with our world's greatest art form, or our country's greatest art form, but the world's greatest art in general, that we can use the arts and culture to heal and help outstanding causes is priceless. Because, like I said, the funds that can be raised, and you can help and you can solve these problems. An exponential movement of Jazz for Peace, I cannot sit here and tell you it wouldn't solve every single one of the world's problems, because there are so many outstanding causes that want to solve them. They're just not being helped enough to do what they're passionate about.
Very well said, yeah. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm truly grateful. You have shown us today that music does not just entertain, it elevates, it heals, and it unites everyone together. And in a world which looks or feels so divided, the people like you and Jazz for Peace and the sound reminds us that harmony is still possible. And I'm truly grateful for today's podcast that you have chosen to be on Inward Strides. And for all the people, I would like to say, until next time, stay inward and stay true to yourself.